I watched Gossip Girl to the point where there were times when I was in New York City and I saw their trailers and I would like linger a little longer. I met Blake Lively doing that.
Really?
Yeah, because they were like always there.
Was she nice? Was
She
she
was
like,
so nice.
oh, yay.
I saw her trailer. So I like lingered a little bit. Like I walked down to the block, came back, walked one more time, and she was coming out. It was late at night. She was coming out and we were like, hi. And she was like, hi, do you guys want a picture? And we were like, yes. Like she offered a picture. So we were like, yes, of course. Right. And then she's like, well, I'm really sick. I have a super sore throat. So like, don't get too close. But like, and she took a picture with us. I think I also got a picture with Penn Badgley.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, who was also very nice.
Wow, look at you. Okay. You have like first person knowledge of
I do. And that's why when people are like, oh, she's such a bitch, I'm like, I don't know. She was like really nice. But could have been an off day. I don't know. Maybe she's just feeling generous that day. I don't know.
Hello and welcome to Two Queens, Two Crowns. I'm your host, KJ Miller, founder, lecturer, and content creator.
And I'm Erica Manganelli, pop culture humorist and content creator.
And today on the show, we are talking about Blake Lively and Leighton Meester. I will be honest, I did not originally have these two on my list of women to talk about, but of course, Blake's just been in the media so much these past few weeks. And not only has she been in the media, but people have been like digging up her past interactions with her past cast and crew. So somehow Leighton Meester has entered the conversation as well. So it felt like, you know what, we should talk about it.
Yeah. And Leighton was kind of like going a little viral during the Golden Globes because she was with her husband, who was from the OC. I can't remember his name right now.
Well, the actor's name is Adam Brody. I forget the character he played on OC, but yes.
Yeah, and she like went to give him his moment on the red carpet, and he was like, "No, come here," and everyone was like enamored with how happy they seem, I guess.
Yeah. And they do seem really happy, and they do seem super cute. Of course, he was in that show with Kristen Bell. What's it called? Nobody Wants This. Did you watch it?
Oh, I didn't see it.
It was good.
I have to watch it.
It was quite cute. But yeah, I mean, I wish that I could say the comments were just like, oh, they're so cute. They're so lovely. But everyone was like, this is the real power couple. Fuck Blake and Ryan.
Of course they were. I didn't even see that. No, of course they were. Yeah.
It couldn't just be about Leighton Meester.
No,
it immediately had to flip and be.
No, she can't have her moment. She's not allowed. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, but to your point, to that point, she is back in the zeitgeist, largely because people have been talking so much about Blake Lively, and we'll get into it. But as usual, when there is just like a lot of chatter and a lot of people talking about two women being against one another or not being girls or not supporting one another, it just makes my spidey sense go off and makes me think, is there more to this story? And I'm here to tell you there is more to the story.
Well, I can't wait to hear it because the only thing that I know about these two is that there may have been a little riff on the show where they didn't get along over a wardrobe budget. That's all I've ever heard. Interesting.
Okay. And see, that's not even a rumor that made it my way or even through the research I did. So maybe, but it could also be that people were just finding things to say that they disliked about each other or fought about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was apparently Leighton got a bigger budget for clothing and then Blake was angry, was the rumor.
Interesting. All right. Well, we will dig into all of that right after this. As some of you know, when I'm not yapping about pop culture or running my business Minted Cosmetics, I am teaching. I've been a lecturer at Yale School of Management for several years. I am now starting at Fisher College of Business at Ohio State. So I love to teach business. I love to do business. And I did relaunch my on-demand course, Startup Starter Kit, recently. So I am inviting anyone who wants to learn more about entrepreneurship, wants it to be accessible, wants it to feel tangible. You don't need to get a fancy MBA. You can simply sign up for my course. So go to kjmiller.co if you'd like to learn more. And with that, let's get back to the show. Okay, so let's dive in. I want to first just give you some quick background on Blake and Leighton, because I do think it kind of helps inform their differing approaches to their careers and also to fame more broadly. So I'll start with Blake. Now, do you know anything about Blake's upbringing, her parents, any of that?
She's like a nepo baby, right? I'm pretty sure she's
Yes.
came from money.
Yes.
That's all I know.
Correct. Ding, ding, ding.
Private school,
Yeah,
I think? Okay.
she is very much a
In
nepo
New
baby.
York, right?
Now, the New York part, I'm not actually sure about.
Okay, I'm not
I
sure.
thought she lived in LA growing
Okay,
up,
she
or like
probably
in
did.
California. But she definitely was a nepo baby. Her dad was an actor and a director,
Right.
and in fact,
Mhm.
he cast Blake in her first film role when she was 10 years old.
I recall that actually, now that you say
Yes.
that.
Yes. And then her mom was an actor and also a talent manager. And her
Okay.
mom and dad were married until her dad passed away, which happened in 2021.
Mhm.
The thing that I didn't realize, because I remember always hearing she was a nepo baby, her family was in the business. It
Mhm.
wasn't just her mom and dad. So between the two parents, they had 5 kids, Blake included. All
Mhm.
5 of them were actors.
Okay.
Every
I
single
didn't
so
even
the
know there was that many.
yeah,
Mhm.
literally the whole it was the family business. Hollywood was the family business.
Mhm.
And so they all worked in the entertainment industry. And interestingly, Blake says she didn't actually want to be an actor growing up, but she kind of couldn't avoid it because
Right.
it's just like what everybody in the family did. And so she went on that path as well.
What
Yeah.
what what were her siblings in? Anything that we would know?
I looked at some of the
Mhm.
things that they were in and I didn't recognize most of them. It was
Okay.
kind of like smaller roles and kind of
Yeah.
like movies and shows you
I
maybe
think
haven't heard of.
she's the most famous out of the
For sure.
siblings.
For sure.
Mhm.
She's definitely the most famous.
Mhm.
I will note Blake got her, sort of breakout role in Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants
Right. Mhm.
when she was like 17 or so. And her
Mhm.
dad played the father role, like played
Oh,
her
I didn't
father.
know that.
I didn't know that either. I had
Mm.
no idea. So yeah, I
I
mean
like that
it's
movie.
now, see, I have
Mhm.
never seen it, but I will say
Mhm.
the marketing the way that they initially marketed It Ends With Us to me was giving like Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants
Oh, for
because,
sure, yeah.
because it was like
Yeah.
florals and smiles and everything else. So when I found out it was about domestic violence, I was honestly shocked because I thought it was like
Yeah.
another, cute,
Right, yeah.
cutesy young adult sort of movie. That's how it seemed like they were marketing it.
They definitely were.
Yeah.
I'm always enamored with, Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants because, like, that cast stayed really good friends for, like,
Hmm.
ever, and they
Yeah.
still, like, support each other today. It's, like,
Yeah.
incredible.
In all of when
Mhm.
Blake dropped her lawsuit against
Mhm.
Justin Baldoni, the 3 of them who were also in that movie, America Ferrera, and then I forget the other 2 actors.
I
Isn't the
can't remember their names.
one of them isn't it the girl from Gilmore Girls? Alexa
Rory?
somebody. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
Rory.
Yeah, hold on.
We're like, we don't know these girls' names, but Anyway, the point is they
Yeah.
all issued a joint statement in support of Blake Lively. And they did that movie
Mhm.
20 years ago. So yeah, like they have stayed relatively close, it seems.
Alexis Bledel. I don't know if that's how
Yes.
you say it, and Amber
Yes.
Tamblyn.
Uh-huh.
Yes,
There you
that's
have
it.
it.
There's other names. We don't wanna mess them up. Don't come for us in the comments.
We're sorry. Okay. We're sorry.
Mhm.
But yes, so they have stayed close. And that was really Blake's breakout role. So she had been in
Mhm.
films before then, and
Right.
she had roles before then, but Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants is where she really like sort of like broke out. And interestingly, I didn't know this, but a lot of the fans of Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, when they found out that Gossip Girl, which was originally a book series, was being made into a TV show,
Mhm.
they like started like going online and basically trying to put Blake Lively forward for Serena, like
Oh,
basically saying
wow.
like it's got to be Blake Lively, she's the perfect person. Like the
Oh, wow.
directors, the creators of the show said that there was just like so much online fodder for specifically for Blake Lively that they didn't even see that many people for the role. They were like, we really kind of just had her in mind.
Oh, wow, I had no idea. I did not know that. I wasn't an initial Gossip Girl fan. It was after, like, a season that my friends all really got into it, and they were like, "You have to watch it. You have to watch it." They were, like, hounding me, so I eventually became a fan.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't know that people had been like clamoring for her because I had never heard of her. Like I
Right.
said, I didn't see that
Mhm.
movie, so I wasn't familiar with her.
Right.
But yeah, she kind of walked into Gossip Girl not only being a bit of an industry vet because she had been working since she was 10, but also a bit of a star in her own right, particularly relative to the rest of the cast. The rest of the cast,
Mm.
people didn't really know
Do you think she
all that
walked in
well.
there like, yes, they wanted me for this role. Here I am, the star. Do you think it was like that kind of
Well,
vibe?
and you know what? I certainly think that became part of the rumor mill.
For
I
sure.
definitely think
Yeah.
that became part of the rumor mill. Now, speaking of the rest of the cast, that brings me on to Leighton Meester. Now, did you know anything about her upbringing or her parents or anything?
Nothing. Oh, I know a little bit. She had like a tumultuous relationship with her mom. I do remember that. And there was like some
Yes.
drama. She like was paying her mom, and then her mom used different plastic surgery, and it was like a drama thing.
Yes.
Hmm.
You remember a lot for
I say,
you're like, I don't know anything about it. And then you're like, except for this one very specific thing, I do remember that.
I only remember like the drama. If there was some sort of drama, it's like burned into my brain.
Right. Yes. Okay. Well, here's some drama you did not know, and I also
Mhm.
did not know. When Leighton was born,
Mm.
her mother was in prison.
No, I didn't know that. No, I
Yeah.
didn't.
Actually,
Mm-mm.
both her mother and her father were in prison for smuggling marijuana from Jamaica to the US as a part of a drug ring.
No.
Yes.
What? Okay. How did she break into acting?
Well, okay, so she's born, so her mom gets leave to have the baby in a hospital and then to stay with the baby for a couple months in a halfway house.
Okay.
So she has Leighton, they're staying in halfway house for a couple months before she then has to go back to prison. So
Mhm.
then Leighton is transferred to her paternal grandparents and raised by them when
Okay.
she's a young baby. Eventually, and it gets a little murky, but it sounds like eventually, her mother is released from prison. She goes
Mhm.
to live with her mother, and she says she has a relatively normal childhood, and she starts
Mhm.
like acting in like, school plays, like
Yeah.
community plays, that sort of thing, which is very interesting. I will say, like, to have gone to jail as a part of a drug ring and then get out of jail and still be able to provide like a normal life for your kid is like, that is
Crazy.
that
Yeah.
is some sort of privilege. Like,
Yeah.
obviously she had a tumultuous past and like a tough past, but like there are a lot of people when they get out of prison, they cannot provide a normal life for
They got out
their
of
child.
prison. Can we
Yeah.
talk about that? They let
Right.
them
That's the
out of
other thing.
prison?
That's the other thing. They got out of prison. I think her whole sentence was like 2 years or less.
Oh my gosh, I thought you were gonna say like 10.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Hmm.
there's a little bit of privilege in that,
There's
but
stuff I want to say, but I'm not gonna say. There's too much
but
privilege there. Okay.
yeah, there's definitely some privilege there. But
Yeah.
she says she had, by all accounts, a relatively normal childhood from there, and did some smaller acting roles. But by the time she got to Gossip Girl, unlike Blake, who had been in like big movies, had kind of, I wouldn't say she was a household name, but there were some households that knew her name, not
Right.
mine, but someone did. um, at that point, when Leighton booked Gossip Girl, she had only done a couple of like guest appearances. She had been a guest actor on 24, and
Okay.
she had done a guest spot on Law and Order.
I was
But
about to say Law and Order because everyone starts on Law and Order.
yes,
Mm.
everybody starts in Law
You
and
know
Order.
what? Law and Order, call me.
Right. But actually it's true. Like, it's like a rite of passage for
It
actors to
is,
like
yeah.
have a guest spot on Law and Order. So
Mhm.
that's all she had done when she booked the role. So when she came to it, she was not known. No one knew who she was. She wasn't coming off a big movie. She wasn't coming from a Hollywood family where everyone was like, oh yeah, I worked with her dad on XYZ film or
Right.
blah, blah, blah. She didn't have any of that. She was coming in as an unknown.
I already see where the bad blood is forming here. I see it.
And to add just like a little bit more context to the family piece, as you alluded to, she and her mom did eventually have just a tough relationship because while she was filming Gossip Girl, she started sending, according to TMZ, she started sending about $7,500 a month home so that her mom could take care of her younger brother, who I think struggled with like mental health issues.
Mhm.
But
She didn't spend it on
she
him.
didn't spend it on the brother. Basically,
Allegedly.
she had to sue her mom because the money was being spent on like Botox and
I
hair
hate it.
extensions. Again, allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
We don't know, supposedly.
We don't. Right. That's what TMZ says. TMZ says they obtained the lawsuit and they read the
Okay.
lawsuit, and that's what was alleged in the lawsuit. So not only did she not come with this like Hollywood family, but she didn't have nearly as much like familial support
Right.
coming into the Gossip Girl world.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get to Gossip Girl, which debuted in September 2007. And I will say one thing I didn't realize until I went back and started reading about it was like just how pivotal a moment we were experiencing in 2007 when it comes to the landscape of both social media and TV. Because for social media, it's actually, I feel like it's hard to like remember this time in history. It feels so long ago. But Facebook didn't open to the public until 2006. So up until that point, it had
You had to be in college.
You had to be in college.
Yeah.
So in 2006 is when it opened up for everybody. Also in 2006 is when Twitter launched.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So by the time we get Gossip Girl in 2007, I feel like the social media landscape had just started to kind of look the way it looks now. You know, like we were just like on the forefront of that.
Totally.
And we were right before
streaming. Yeah. Because I was going to say, what I remember about Gossip Girl is that I was dating a guy who would never want to watch Gossip Girl with me. And so when it would come on at that certain time of week, you knew exactly when it was. Let's just say it was 7 o'clock Wednesday. Can't remember what day it was because I also watched One Tree Hill during that time and was obsessed. I had to be where a TV was.
Yeah.
Okay. It wasn't like you could watch it later.
Yeah.
No way. I needed to be where a TV would lock myself in a room.
Yeah.
And now that's like not a thing.
That's like not a thing. Yes, exactly. So this was such a pivotal moment because again, it was live TV viewing. I remember my roommate and I were both into Gossip Girl. So we would like sit and watch and it was starting that time where like you would live tweet a show. So like, you know, Blair would be trending or like, you know, Lonely Boy Dan, you know.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Right. So like it was this just like like a real pivotal moment. And I think that's part of what allowed it to be such a big part of the zeitgeist.
Totally.
There's a article that was written in Vanity Fair to celebrate the 10-year anniversary. So this came out in 2017. And they spoke about this in a way that I think just really resonated with me. So they said, if every generation has its one or two shows that prove defining, that essentially everyone seemed to watch as if there were no other choice in the matter, Gossip Girl would be that show for anyone who was a teenager or 20-something when it first aired. The show premiered before Instagram or Snapchat had launched and before Facebook and Twitter had become the juggernaut forces they are today. Wow. But the premise of the series, an anonymous blogger who goes by Gossip Girl monitors the goings-on of a small group of glamorous Upper East Side high schoolers, predicted to an almost eerie extent what was to come for our culture. The notion of a group of people being callously gossiped about online by an anonymous troll certainly has resonance in our current climate, in which celebrities are often blogged about with a blithe and biting disregard.
Wow, what an interesting perspective. I never thought about it like that before.
No, me neither. But
crazy.
I think it's such a very interesting perspective, and I would say pretty insightful perspective. And it makes it make even more sense why it caught on the way it did, because it was sort of the precursor to, I mean, almost the way in which a lot of us are now used to like getting our news. I think a lot of us get our news from like, not trolls,
it's like
but creators online. Yeah.
Yeah. Like all their phones were ringing at the same time. They're all like checking it. That's exactly what it's like right now. Crazy.
Yeah. You're getting on TikTok and you're getting the breaking news update from the creator who's telling you about whatever celebrity or politician did XYZ. Like, very prescient, you know?
Yeah, totally.
So, of course, almost immediately, we start hearing rumors about the two leading ladies not liking one another. And I will just say, reading through some of this gave me a renewed sense of respect for Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande and how far out of their way they have gone to make it clear, like, we like each other. We are friends.
Yeah.
Like, you are not going to split us up. You are not going to pit us against one another.
Totally.
Like, because I will tell you, one, they don't have to do that clearly. Like, there are
No.
plenty of leading Hollywood folks who don't even show up on red carpets together.
Right.
And two, I could not find more than like 2 instances where Leighton and Blake were even interviewed together.
Yeah, they weren't a lot. I want to say I vaguely kind of remember that there was an instance where they tried to shut this rumor down. Did you read anything about that?
Yeah, and the thing is, the thing that they both did, and I will give them both credit for, is neither one of them ever gave it any air.
Okay,
So like there was never even like a catty side comment from one of them about the other.
No one was throwing shade.
No one was throwing shade. Like they just were not giving it any airtime in their interviews. And to me, what really starts to emerge when you look at their careers and also when you consider their upbringing and how they came into this show so differently, what really starts to emerge to me is just that like they weren't friends.
Yeah.
They were
They weren't friends. And honestly, the rumor could have started the riff. Because imagine like if you didn't have beef and then all these rumors about you having beef started, you might be like, did she say that about me?
100%. And what's interesting is one of the producers on the show, while they were doing this 10-year anniversary article, he even said like, no, they were never friends. He says Blake and Leighton were not friends. They were friendly, but they were not friends like Serena and Blair. Yet the second they'd be on set together, it's as if they were, which to me means they were
Great
professionals.
Yeah.
Yes, they were professionals. They were good actors and they were coworkers.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah, because they don't have to be friends, especially at the caliber of friendship they had on the show was a different level. It was like lifelong friends.
Right.
I mean, they were never going to come on the set not knowing each other ever before and be lifelong friends immediately.
And also when you think about just like how different of their upbringings were, like, you know, in some ways, Blake Lively might be a really, really genuinely nice person, like your interaction with her might suggest. That doesn't change the fact that like she walked onto that set knowing the ins and outs of Hollywood. Right? Like having been in the industry for years and years, having 2 parents who had been in the industry for decades and decades. She walked onto that set with just like a different level of knowledge and a different level of experience. And so the fact of the matter is she and Leighton were extremely different in that regard.
Yeah.
And maybe that just didn't form the basis for like a close friendship.
Right. They're living very different lives.
Very different lives. And actually to that point, there's an interview that actually Leighton Meester did about in 2018. She did an interview with W Magazine where she just sort of talked about like how the environment of Gossip Girl was like a difficult environment for her, particularly at that age. So she said in this interview, I was young when I started Gossip Girl. A lot more people were suddenly around and I was being looked at. If you don't have the right perspective, you could definitely be confused by people being that nice to you or judging you for behavior that's typical of a 20 or 21-year-old, making mistakes but having to make them very publicly. I'm not haunted by that time, but it's been interesting and helpful for me to look at it and examine it as an adult and go, I don't know if it was the healthiest environment.
I could totally see that. And this could possibly be why I like her so much, is that's a very down-to-earth response.
Yes.
And I could very much put myself in in those shoes as like someone who didn't grow up with like massive privilege. Obviously I've have some privilege, but not like on a Blake Lively level. I could see coming into that and having to work with someone who does come from massive privilege like that and be like, this bitch a little bit, you know, like maybe not to her face, but like, but go home and be like, holy shit, this girl is really privileged.
Yeah, you know, well, and the other thing is not only that, but Blake Lively was being treated differently, like very differently by the media and by the industry. And it's hard to parse out exactly how much of this was her being treated differently versus how much of this was the two of them making different choices. But I will say, like, a lot of the articles I saw from that time period kind of had like a winners versus losers trope. Like, oh, Blake Lively just booked the cover of Vogue.
Okay, yeah.
But Leighton Meester didn't. So Blake Lively wins. She's the it girl.
Yeah.
Or like at one point, Blake Lively had gotten, she became the face of Chanel's Mademoiselle handbag line. And again, the articles were like, oh, and Blake Lively is the
got
face.
Nothing.
Leighton got nothing. But Blake Lively got the handbag, you know?
Yeah.
So there definitely was like, the media chiming in and trying to make it seem like only one of you can win, and Blake Lively is the one winning. And then when you couple that with, again, and this might just be how they wanted to approach their careers differently, Blake was also she was in The Town with Ben Affleck. Okay. I think that movie was 2010. She was in Age of Adelaide, where she starred. She was the star of the film. Then she did A Simple Favor, right? So all of these things are coming sort of like either during or after Gossip Girl. Whereas Leighton Meester, she was in movies that much, frankly, right? I had not even heard of. She was in indie films that I had never heard of. She did a television show later called Single Parents, which I think only had like 1 or 2 seasons.
I don't remember.
And then she also did like an indie band. She sang in an indie band. And so when you look at Blake Lively over here with Ben Affleck, and you look at Leighton Meester over here with in an indie film no one's heard of.
Yeah.
That also sort of reinforces the narrative that like one of them is winning and one of them is losing.
Yeah. And now knowing all this context, this background, I'm thinking to myself, well, she just didn't have the connections. She didn't have the connections to go any further than Gossip Girl, right? Because she was like a big star in that show.
Yeah. And the thing is, I don't know if it's that she didn't have the connections or she just didn't want to go down the path.
Yeah. Maybe she was turned off by that, like by being a star in Gossip Girl. Maybe it turned her off completely, and she was like, "I don't like doing this that much."
Right, and she's again, if we go back to what she said in W Magazine, she said it wasn't the healthiest environment. She said she had to make a lot of mistakes publicly. She said she wasn't sure who she could trust, like were the people being nice or the people being judgmental, like how real was it all? I could envision if that is your defining experience in Hollywood, because remember, she started that show when she was 20, and it's, it becomes this, TV juggernaut. She's splashed all over the magazine covers, but also doesn't know who to trust, not a healthy environment. That might make you, if that's the one big experience you have of acting, that might make you think, you know what, I want to go do some smaller indie films. Like, I've made the money. Now let me just go, kind of take a step back.
And to her saying, like, she had to make all these public mistakes and all that, I'm thinking to myself, I don't remember a single one.
I don't remember any
I don't remember a single thing that she did that was, like, problematic or hooking up with someone or nothing. I don't remember anything.
Well,
couldn't have been that bad.
It couldn't have been that bad. And also, this is one of the things that one of the show's creators was saying. She was just, like, more quiet and more reserved.
Yeah,
and
being hard on herself.
Yeah. So whereas Blake was, one of the things he talked about was that Blake was very much in the moment and knew what was going on, like not just on set and on film, but was very much like out and about, knew where to be, knew what restaurants were opening, was just kind of like a New York City girl.
Right.
Where Leighton Meester was more reserved, more kept to herself. When it was time to go home, she was like, and now I'm going home.
Yeah, she came to work and went home. Exactly. Which I fear would be me. I'd be like, all right, now I'm going to go to sleep. See you guys in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. This is what actually just so I can read the exact quote, this producer said, Blake is very much in the moment. Blake knows what's happening. She knows this movie's coming out. This band is happening. You talk to Blake on a very contemporary level, and she would be like, I'm doing this thing tonight. Have you been to this restaurant? Leighton was very removed and very quiet. And after her scenes were done, she would wander the stage. I had this image of her just in these gorgeous dresses with a book in her hand, sort of a little bit out of focus out in the corners. So, I mean, which is
taking it all in. Never been there before, taking it all in.
Yeah. which is also, I think, kind of an interesting way for him to describe her, like wandering the stage with a book in her hand.
Yeah, it's weird. She's like, she just said no one in the corner. I was like, I don't like that vibe.
I don't like that vibe. And this was the guy in charge on set. Like,
yeah, maybe that was part of the problem.
Maybe that was part of the problem, because maybe she felt like she was being compared to Blake Lively, and Blake Lively was out and about. She knew what was going on. She knows the Hollywood business. She knows how to ask for what she wants. She knows how to make space for herself. Maybe Leighton didn't quite know all that and kind of kept to herself. Like,
do we know how long that show ran?
Yes, 6 years.
6 years. Okay. I was going to say, why did it end? But it probably just ended because it was 6 years.
Yeah. I think they had like run out of stories. Yeah. Like everyone had slept with everyone. Everyone had broken up with everyone. It's like, well, nothing left here.
And they can't be in high school forever. It's
right.
Like...
Exactly.
Totally.
Exactly.
Are they still friends?
Well, here's the thing. Still friends. I think they were never friends.
Okay.
I think they were never friends. They don't follow each other on Instagram.
I was going to ask that.
And they don't bring up one another in interviews.
Ever.
But they also have never spoken ill of one another.
Yeah.
Like, I really tried to find even one singular quote where they had said something negative about the other person. I couldn't find not one.
Well, when this whole thing came up with Blake Lively being a quote unquote bitch, everyone's like talking bad about her, and they brought Leighton up. I also did the deep dive to try to find out if they ever talked shit about each other and could not find a single thing. But I do think it's interesting that they never talk highly of each other either. Because there's got to be a little something there, you know?
Well, and that's why I say it gave me renewed respect for Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, because I do think they went out of their way to make it clear, like, we respect one another. We are friends. We care about each other.
For sure.
And you did not see Leighton and Blake do that at all. And of course, in the absence of that, I think people did come to their own conclusions that, like, okay, y'all don't like each other, because if you liked each other even a little bit, I feel like we'd get more of the two of you together. And there really is nothing. And then a clip did resurface, because, you know, everybody over the last few weeks has been resurfacing every interview Blake Lively has ever done.
Yes.
And so I don't know, did you see, this was right when, I think season 1 of Gossip Girl had just aired. This was in 2008. They were at some festival called Paley Fest.
I think I might know what you're talking about.
The whole cast was on a panel, which to me is insanity. Like, I hate people put too many people on.
Me too. It's so annoying.
Who can even hear anyone talk? Okay, but anyway.
No, that's the part that's annoying. Give them each their moment so I can hear what's going on.
Exactly. The whole cast is on a panel, and there are sort of these two moments where the interaction between Blake Lively and Leighton Meester does looks a little strained, a little awkward. And of course, that taken in conjunction with all the other old interviews people have started like pulling up about Blake Lively starts to reinforce the narrative that she's like a mean girl and that, you know, her coworkers hate her.
Yeah.
And like, that could be true. To be clear, that could be true. She could be a mean girl and her coworkers may have hated her. At the same time, when I watch these clips, and I'm gonna play it for you. When I watch these clips, it gives off awkward for sure. It gives off potentially more media training is needed. I don't know that I think, oh, mean girl, everyone hates you, but
play it.
Let me be the judge.
Play it.
Okay, at this specific moment, they are talking about Blake Lively making the decision to accept the role and be on the show. And she sort of is saying like, yeah, but I had some stipulations. I didn't want to act with like wild animals. I didn't want to like be on a show with like a rattlesnake. Because she was talking about, I guess, like there's some show that her sister was on the WB where there were like live animals. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't follow the full gist of the conversation, but that's where we're sort of picking up.
Okay.
It was another problem was I no pet monkey. Chuck has a matching pet monkey with coordinating outfits, and I was like, I would love to be part of the show, but I can't act with a monkey. And then I got And a few of them.
At least you got a few of them.
Come on, it was a joke. Lord have mercy.
Okay, so just in case the audio doesn't come through for our audience, the quote was, Blake Lively said, I made it clear I didn't want a pet monkey because Chuck's character has a pet monkey. And then she goes, gesturing to Leighton Meester and the rest of the cast to her left, and then I got a few of them. And then it's kind of awkward silence. And then she's like, come on, I'm just joking.
Wait, so this actually is a great segue into what I've been thinking the whole time.
Okay.
I meant to say earlier is that sometimes with these interviews, like, yes, she could totally be a bitch and we just don't know, right? And maybe some of them I'm like, maybe they really don't like each other. But then other instances, I'm like, I think that she might have an elevated sense of that she's funnier than she is. And she like tries so hard to crack some of these jokes that she obviously is thinking very hilarious. I also have that problem in my life, but they're not hitting. Some of the jokes are not hitting, and this is definitely one of them.
This is one of them. Thank God none of her coworkers are black, because
I was thinking that the whole time.
Oh my God, if she had said that and gestured to her left to a bunch of black co-stars. Oh my
No,
God.
because when she said it, that's what I was getting nervous about. I was like, oh my gosh. No.
And just in general, I think, I mean, obviously it's a very racially loaded thing if you say it to a black person, but even if it's not a black person, I don't think anyone wants to be called a monkey.
No, it's so cringe. I don't like it.
Extremely
It makes me
cringe.
uncomfortable, and I wasn't even there.
And the fact that like there's that little bit of silence right after she says it. So
yeah, because I think everybody goes, everyone's looking around like, I can't.
And exactly. And it's like, yeah, I don't know if it's her being a mean girl or, like you said, her just not knowing how to land a joke. Right.
Because also I'm thinking with this great privilege of growing up as, you know, in Hollywood, basically her whole family is, maybe she's used to like just everyone liking her, even if they don't actually like her, right? Like they're like elevating her in every instance that she's in, as to not piss off her dad or like whatever it is. And maybe she just like thinks she's really funny and thinks everyone really likes her because she's lived no other life.
Well, and you know, there is that old adage that beautiful people aren't funny because they don't have to be.
Right. So true. It's so true.
Like, but honestly, and she clearly has always been a thin, blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful girl.
Yeah.
And so you've never had to rely on humor. You're not like those of us who had to rely on humor to get through middle school.
Right.
Because we were not thin or blonde or whatever. Like I agree with you. I can't tell.
That might be part of the problem on set is maybe this producer is like, Blake is the best. Oh my God, we love her. She's the best. And then like Leighton's just like, by the way, I'm killing it. Are you guys fucking not noticing?
Yeah.
You know? But they're just like trying to make her dad happy or I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
Not piss off the industry.
I think that's such a good point because, you know, the fact of the matter is right now, people are giving Blake Lively so much vitriol. It's reached a point where it's starting to make me a little uncomfortable. And I guess part of the reason it's making me uncomfortable is because, like, I'm not saying she doesn't deserve some criticism. I think she probably does. Like, the plantation wedding alone, I think.
Oh, for sure. At least she apologized for it. We got people that aren't even apologizing. Yeah.
But so I'm not saying she doesn't deserve critique or criticism. But I will say now that it's been ongoing for so long and now that it's like picked back up in the wake of these lawsuits, like if you go to her Instagram.
Oh, it's crazy.
I just was looking at the most recent posts for both of them. I think one, she's talking about she's talking about the holidays, like making like a holiday spread like for Christmas. And then one, she got some award for her hair care launch from WWD. Okay. For both of them, the most liked comment, and I'm talking about like 20,000 likes, is someone at the top being like, press the cancel Blake Lively button. And that's the like. And then they put an arrow over to the like button and it has like 20,000 likes. And I'm just like, oh God.
Yeah. And now like, okay, so he had said, Justin Baldoni had said like somewhere in his lawsuit or wherever, that he had never been spoken to the way that Ryan Reynolds had spoken to him regarding like allegedly fat shaming her, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm thinking to myself, maybe no one's ever spoken to her like this, in the sense of like she's never gotten any backlash in her entire life because everyone's been like, be nice to Lively's kid. Like, this is probably the first time she's ever received like major criticism.
Yeah. And it's been like tough to watch. I'm not
It
even,
is tough to watch. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm
It's
not even
'cause it's a woman.
necessarily. Yeah. It's like, I'm not even necessarily taking her side. It's more than I'm just like, ooh, like it looks tough. But anyway, back to her and Leighton. So that was one instance. Again, we just don't have a lot of interactions between the two of them on record. So this is one of the only ones. So I showed you that one. Let me show you the other one where it's the same interview, but another moment kind of between the two of them. And you tell me what you think.
Okay.
You know, they're both supposed to be flawed characters who have both good and bad attributes. And I think depending on an episode to episode, you feel differently about each character.
Agreed. I think it makes more sense when you're watching a show that there's not an obvious choice between good and evil. So she would seem like the obvious choice, but she's also got, you know, flaws as well. But I think I'm just brunette because of the books.
And everyone knows blondes are nicer anyway.
Over there.
Moment by me.
What she actually said, what Blake actually said, feels like what I was saying before, where she does not know how to land a joke. Yeah. But Leighton's reaction to it is giving I hate this bitch. Like, it's almost like there she goes again, taking a dig at me. Like, that's the face I'm seeing.
Yeah. And I will say to that, I think that's astute, because here's the thing. And this I think just gets back to the idea that they are not friends, but also gives a little bit of credence to the idea that it goes beyond them not being friends and moves a little bit into the we don't like each other territory. Because if my friend, for instance, if you made a joke and didn't land it, I would still give you a courtesy laugh because you're a friend. Do you know what I'm saying? I would not just leave you out there in the cold.
Spoiler alert, she's courtesy laughing me this whole time.
That's the whole podcast. It's just
the whole podcast.
No, but literally, like, I would give you a courtesy laugh, and I wouldn't look at you. She not only was there no courtesy laugh, but there was also kind of like a side eye, like which just isn't the way you treat a friend, and also starts to veer towards the way you treat someone who you don't like. And by the way, she might be very valid in disliking Blake.
For sure.
I'm not taking that from her. But I do think like a lot of the narrative that we saw between these two was for sure overblown. It doesn't seem like there was some blood feud rivalry.
No, yeah.
At the same time, I think it probably started from somewhere, and probably started from the fact like they weren't friends and maybe didn't enjoy each other's company all that much, which is like, we all have coworkers like that.
100%. And I would even give some of them a courtesy laugh. That's what's like really throwing me for a loop. Sometimes I wonder also, like, does she know that she's acting like that? Like or is she in this privilege bubble where she's just like, I don't get it. My jokes are hilarious. Like,
and
again, I'm not hurting her feelings. Am I?
Yeah. It's sort of back to this beautiful people don't have to be funny. If you've never really had to be funny, if that is not a tool that you have had to hone for your own self-preservation, the way 100%. A lot of us had to growing up and trying not to get bullied and everything else, if it's not a tool you've had to hone, then I think there are a lot of pieces of it that you miss. It's like, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it, it's when you say it, it's the company you say it in.
Yeah.
All of these little things that you like learn sort of and start to begin to intuit that I just get the sense Blake has not had to do. She just has not had to do.
He or she might not know how to read the room. Because she's never
Right.
had to read the room.
Exactly.
It's like literally groomed into it.
Exactly. Because every room she has ever walked into, she has been a star. She has
Yep.
been a beautiful. She's pretty much been all eyes on her every room she's ever walked into. So yeah, like this is not a skill she's had to hone. So when you go back and you watch these interviews, yeah, it can read as bitchy mean girl, but it could also just be like awkward and not funny.
Yeah. Totally. Where she just
Could be.
doesn't realize that she's maybe just not as cool as as she might have been raised to think.
Right. But I will say, to her credit, you know, I do feel like both Leighton and Blake never gave in, like never took the bait.
Never. But see, now I kind of wonder if the reason why they never took the bait is because Leighton's being classy. She's like, I'm not going to have them drag me down for talking bad about this big star. Whereas the other one isn't even realizing she's being a bitch to her. So she's like, why would I talk about that? That's not even happening.
Right.
You know?
So there's almost like There's a disconnect. Blake is like aloof. She doesn't even, whereas maybe Leighton is like, I'm not, I don't want to like fuel the fire and like feed the trolls.
Yeah, you know when you work with someone and you might not actually get along and then like you never speak ever again after you don't work there anymore? I feel like that's what happened. Never talk ever again. They're like, that's just someone I worked with once. Didn't really like them.
Yeah. And by the way, we've all been there.
Everyone.
And you know, I will say, just like to the topic of like queens helping queens, how they helped one another. First of all, I do genuinely think this show was such a juggernaut, and it worked because they both were so good in their roles. And like their producer said, who was on set, he said they weren't friends, but as soon as they got on set, they turned it on immediately. And it was believable. Their on-screen chemistry, to me at least, was believable. They did a good job of pretending to be like lifelong friends who had a very complicated relationship. And they both clearly benefited from that, you know, like kicked off the biggest part of their careers because of that. So they definitely, whether they liked each other or not, helped each other by showing up and being professionals for one another.
For sure. And 6 years on set, you can't tell me that there was never one drama incident ever on set with anyone in the cast.
Right.
And they have never done a sort of like Gossip Girl tell-all situation where they like outed any of that stuff about one another, about other people. And I think that's interesting too.
Oh, 100%. And even if you think about right now, I have to imagine Leighton Meester has gotten phone calls from every journalist from here to Timbuktu, all wanting to know. And she's not saying anything, even if she could. And so that's another way I do feel like they've helped one another is throughout, even since Gossip Girl ended, which it came to an end, I think in 2013, 2012, something like that. They've never had anything negative to say about one another post-production. They've never commented on any dramas that have come up about one another. So I feel like they've maintained that level of professionalism, and that not only helps both of them, but I think also helps the legacy of the show. Like,
for sure.
People not getting so wrapped up in whatever the personal dramas were for the show. You can just like go back and watch it in a nostalgic sort of way, you know?
Yeah, totally. I think it still is a good show. I don't know. I still think there's definitely some beef there. I think Leighton likes to live a quiet life. I think that's what she likes, and she's happy in her quiet life with her kids and her husband. And I think that's probably why we don't see her much. Like I don't think she works anymore, right? She does like ad work.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've seen her like in a show, in a movie.
Right.
I think she's taken a big step back and focused on, her home life, her kids with Adam Brody. And I will just say, I feel like she does like kind of a quieter life. I also think it is a good reminder for all of us that like it is okay to just be a coworker with someone. Like it doesn't have to be a friendship. And I've actually said this so many times, particularly as it relates to startups. I find it very weird when like startup CEOs are like, we're a family, because we're not a family.
No, we're not. We're coworkers.
We're coworkers. And the truth of the matter is, if you need to fire somebody to save your bottom line and save money, you will. Whereas I'm not firing my cousin.
No.
So we're not a family. It is okay for a job to be a job. I do think sometimes women in particular get pushed into get pushed to make something feel more familial. Like a lot of times we are the quote unquote culture bearers at our organization. We're supposed to make everyone feel welcome, make everyone feel warm, make the place feel like there's a positive culture. And you know what? Maybe the positive culture is we all show up and we do our jobs and we all get paid and then we go home.
And that is go home. Yeah.
And that is very positive. Okay.
Yes, totally.
That has a positive effect on me. And I think it's a good reminder that it doesn't have to be a family.
No, it doesn't. And I think also, and this goes for everything, not just jobs. I think you don't always have to talk shit publicly. You could just go home and tell your husband, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, whatever, your significant other, your best friend. You don't always have to talk shit.
You don't. You do not have to take it all to TikTok, which, by the way, some of the things people share on TikTok about their lives, I'm like, you really could have wrote this in a journal, girl, and kept it moving.
Yes. And sometimes it's so true. And sometimes I'm thinking to myself, they're gonna see this. The algorithm is gonna find them, girl. Why?
The algorithm is extremely powerful. They will find this, and the way people rush to share all their personal business,
and people at work with their uniforms on, I'm like, no, put a piece of tape over that shit. What are you doing? You're gonna get fired.
Yeah. It is always okay to just keep it to yourself or keep it to your close circle.
Yeah, sleep on it for a night.
Sleep on it.
Come 100%. Back tomorrow.
And that is really our takeaway from Leighton and Blake.
Yeah.
Whatever beef they had, we still don't know if they had it or what it was, because they were professionals. They kept it to themselves.
Yeah.
And I can respect that.
That's it for this week, everyone. Be sure to follow us on TikTok at 2 Queens, 2 Crowns, and to check out the podcast on YouTube, 2 Queens, 2 Crowns.
Erica and I would also love for you to follow us on our personal socials. I'm on TikTok at @IAM_KJ Miller and YouTube with the handle IAMKJ Miller. And Erica's on IG at Let a Be Know and TikTok at Let a Bitch Know. We'll see you next week.
Bye.